Welcome to the Power Sweep Podcast. This is your host, Chris Van Dyne. My two co-hosts will be joining me in a little while, Jim Seaman and Robbie DePola, as always, giving us some great insight on this week's games and what to look for. Also have another guest handicapper, a good friend of mine and a person I happen to record a podcast with also during the week. His podcast, The Stewcast, Unger, will be joining me here shortly. I want to go over a few things before we get to Al, who I know is excited to talk about some of these big games this week. Not a great week for the first week of Power Sweep and NorthCoast. We admit that, but not a total disaster. And I think that if you remember, we did win our first two-star in Power Sweep and then upgraded to a three-star in that first week 1A with Illinois. So it hasn't been a total disaster. We did go 2-4 in our late phones, but 1-4 on Saturday. Nevada came through. We also had a Thursday star rated play on Boise. Those were our two wins. Unfortunately, a couple of those games didn't work out for us. LSU was a real letdown. 1 and 2 in our totals. We did win our top total, Miami versus Alabama under. Also, and I know a lot of people don't use these on the late phones, but these are good plays, and you might not want to ignore them. We went 2-0 in our small college plays. Small college being FBS versus FCS. And if you got them, you didn't just win 2 games. You won 2 games you didn't really have to sweat out. Middle Tennessee absolutely blew out Monmouth in the second half. Northern Iowa was getting 31 points from Iowa and nearly beat them. So you really were never sweating either of those games. So we went 2-0 in our small college plays. So really, if you used those, you were 4-4 in the week, and it wasn't such a bad week. Power Sweep, again, not great. We can do better. 0-3 in our 3 and 4 stars. Again, LSU, really disappointing. West Virginia was a 4-star. We thought their defense would play much better. Turnover late really changed that game when they were driving to take the lead. We did go 2-0 in our 2 stars. So, Louisiana Tech was a play I really liked. I wish we'd have used his late phone play. We did have a top opinion on it, but not a star-rated play. But that was a cover as a 2-star winner for us. Our underdog play of the week in Power Sweep also won last week with Nevada, who was down early 14-0 to Cal, came through, won that game outright 22-17, dominated the rest of the game. Computer corners and the featured plays, I'm in no way to sugarcoat it, they crap themselves. 1-4 in the computer corner. Now, if you had Power Sweep last year, computer corner was absolutely on fire at the end of the year. It was hitting 67% the last 13 weeks. I wouldn't put too much stock into the first couple weeks on computer corner, but you will see it turn around. It's hard for that computer to adjust those first couple weeks of the season. Once it gets more data on these teams this year, those plays start to become very valuable. So look for computer corner to improve. And a couple weeks from now, I bet you it goes on another run because it's done that the last couple years. Power plays, not a great week, 5 and 6. Not even a good week. 1-1 in our 4.5 stars. Again, got to do better. But first week of the season, still plenty of football to play. Don't panic. I hope you didn't lose your entire bankroll in a bad week. We do stress being responsible, both gambling and as bettors. We want to make this last a while. So if you have a bad week, you can bounce back the following week. So let's come back strong. We've got some good plays this week. If you got Power Sweep already, hope you enjoyed it. We do have late phone packages coming this weekend, and the NFL's here. So hoping for a much better NFL season. A couple of years ago, we were really good in the NFL. Last year, we were really good in college, not great in the NFL. So hoping that we can get both working together at the same time, forming like Voltron, and really put out some big plays by the end of the year and some big weeks. This weekend's late phone plays, Saturday and Sunday, $150 if you're a non-subscriber, $99 if you subscribe to Power Sweep. And frankly, I don't know why you wouldn't subscribe to Power Sweep right now. It's a great newsletter, whether you're using it to use our plays or you just want it as a source of information. A lot of information that you won't find in other places that can point you in the right direction for what you want to do with these plays. So Power Sweep on ncsports.com, currently 109 for the rest of the season. We will be giving out that $10 discount code at the end of this podcast. And you'll also be able to use that on a late phone package if you want. You can call 1-800-654-3448. You can also go to ncsports.com. You can get Power Sweep. You can get Power Plays. You can get one of our late phone services. And also don't forget, we do have our main comp tape, 347-677-1700. We give out free plays on that every day. We give out some baseball. We give out some football, some awesome value with a lot of those plays, including make sure you call in Monday and get the early bird play. Now, you can only call in on Mondays to get that early bird play, but it's been a breadwinner for us. It won in week 1 with Cincinnati minus 23.5. So call in on Monday, get that free early bird play, get your week started. And that is 1-347-677-1700. That is our comp tape to get free plays every day. And now I'm really excited because we're going to bring in our guest handicapper. All right, and we are going to go to our NorthCoast featured handicapper this week. We've got a good friend of mine and someone that I've had the pleasure of being on a podcast with for a little over a year now, Unger from the Stewcast, better known to me as Stew. Stu, we got some great games going on this week, and thank you so much for joining us at NorthCoast and on the Power Sweep podcast. Excited to talk some games on this podcast with you as we do every week on the Stewcast. What do you think about this slate this week?
Well, first off, it's always a pleasure. Anything I can do for you, because you always hook it up coming on the Stewcast every week, and I love Power Sweep. I love the folks at NC Sports, so it's truly a privilege to be on here. And you know me, I don't say this often, Chris. I love the board this week. I love the board. I may go 8-0, 9-1. It feels like one of those weeks. It feels like a week that you can bet the mortgage on your house responsibly and make a killing.
We don't actually suggest to do that to our customers because as a business, we would not have very many left, especially, because we didn't have a great week last week. So we got to bounce back this week. But that's why we're getting a little insight from you this week.
If you want to call it that, Chris, yes, we'll go with that.
We're going to start out with a game I'm actually attending this week for the first time in, over 10 years now. I have not been to a Tennessee game. I am a Vols fan. Been since I was about 9 years old. Haven't been to Knoxville in a while because I've been working here so much. But I am traveling down to Knoxville this week. Pitt versus Tennessee. Joe Milton, kind of not a great first performance in Knoxville. I saw some people getting a little bent out of shape already, calling for Hendon Hooker. 11 of 23, 140 yards, 1 touchdown, nothing spectacular. What was your take on Joe Milton, and how do you feel about the Vols with the Panthers coming into town?
Yeah, I know a lot about Joe Milton, just watching him at Michigan last season. I think what we're seeing out of Joe Milton is that he's just that kind of guy that, he's going to throw for 150 to 200. He's going to try and run the ball for 50, 60 yards a game, and he's going to make some mistakes along the way. It's hard to get a real true grasp on what Tennessee is, and likewise with Pittsburgh, because they played 2 horrific teams. I mean, Christ on a bike, horrific.
They've only played UMass so far, but we'll count UMass as 2.
Yeah. Well, UMass and Bowling Green are in that bottom.
Yeah.
5.
Okay, so both teams play. I thought you meant Pitt played.
Oh yeah, no, both of them.
My misunderstanding. I can't listen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, you should listen to me more often on the Pick Show. But anyway, I think Tennessee is going to try and run the ball. And Pat Narduzzi's got that stifling run defense. I've never been a Kenny Pickett fan, but I feel like if we were talking about Tennessee's defense last year, the year prior, I'd have a lot more reservations. I think he can throw a little bit, but this is such a tight game. I think right now, as we're recording, what's the line? 3.5.
Yes. Yeah. It went above 3 today. So you're giving the hook on Pitt.
Yeah. I guess I would lean slightly with Pitt, just on the idea that their defense is a little bit more put together. And I think offensively they have an identity. I'm still waiting for a Bonaconda, a guy who you talked a lot about in the offseason to me. I'm still waiting for him to show up, but they've got depth and they've got talent. And it's a team that's, I think, a lot more experienced in a lot of ways, especially up front, than this Tennessee ball club, who's experienced a lot of moving parts, a lot of folks out of the program. I'm going to lean Pittsburgh. I don't love the game per se, but if I had your money to bet, I would put it on Pittsburgh.
Fair enough. I do think that I see what Josh Heupel's trying to do offensively. I just think it's going to take time. And what do you think Joe Milton's what do you think the ceiling is for him? Because right now, obviously, he's a work in progress in a new offense, and maybe Heupel thinks it fits him, and that's why he's going with him over Hooker and Harrison Bailey, who has some experience. So what do you think Milton's ceiling is in this offense? Can he put up the kind of numbers that past Heupel quarterbacks have? And I mean, he definitely has the build and the look to do it, and he has the arm. But do you think that he can put up those kind of numbers?
In a word, no. And that's only because, look, you go back again. I don't want to harp on it, but he's a freshman when he did it. But look, you had him on a Michigan team with Nico Collins, Ronnie Bell, DPJ, Donovan Peoples-Jones. Two of those guys are performing on Sunday, and they're important parts to their teams, respectively. And he did nothing. He did absolutely nothing. Now, you can say what you want about the Michigan offensive play calling. That's one thing. He comes to Tennessee, and you're playing a woeful defense. I mean, like, truly an abysmal defense. And he still struggled completing passes. I mean, 11 of 23. I don't care about the yards, because when you're running for 330 yards on the ground, whatever, you're not going to throw it all day. But they went a whole second quarter without scoring. That's unacceptable.
Yeah, that was concerning. And, I also mentioned in Power Sweep, they gave up 3 sacks against Bowling Green. It seemed like he held on to the ball a little bit. And
he gets scared. He's kind of got that Sam Howell syndrome where he's waiting for a Facebook friend request to come through before he throws it to you. And that worries me a lot. And
I like that.
Yeah, well, you can steal it. I've got analogies for days. The Bobcats taught me quite a few. And I'll tell you, I think Milton, he'll progress just by, experience and reps. He'll progress, but I don't think we're too far off. I don't think we're talking about him turning into Matt Corral and gunslinging it. I don't think it's a matter of the wideouts being in place. And to be quite frank, I don't think the UCF paradigm for how they run offenses necessarily works in the SEC, because I think when you look at the Golden Knights, what they do and how they've built that program is they run an SEC style offense with SEC light players. I'm not going to say same caliber, but I mean, they're drawn from pretty much the same pool, and they're playing Tulsa, and they're playing Boise State, and they're playing Cincinnati, and they can have success doing that. Right. I think Heupel is going to fall the way of Scott Frost. Sorry.
All right. Thanks. I might go to sleep now. Thanks. Another 3 or 4 years of that. Hopefully wrong. Hopefully Heupel gets this thing.
I hope so too. We need a healthy Tennessee.
Yeah. Moving over to a game that I know we talked about in your preview on your podcast a little bit. App State at Miami. Interesting game here. App State known for, keeping it close with Power 5 teams. We actually give App State a very slight, I really stress slight edge on defense here, but the fact they're even close is pretty interesting. Chase Bryce has ACC experience. Do you give the Mountaineers a shot to win this game against Miami, who's a little angry after getting embarrassed last week?
To win, no. And first off, I do a lot of work with a mutual friend that runs a Miami show down south, and man, do those people not like me. But when he asked me, I think Miami's going to win, but the line, and we had talked about this Saturday night, the line, we put it at about 8.5, 9.5. And that's where it started at. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure it's hovering right about that. App State against Eastern Carolina. You guys talk up Eastern Carolina quite a bit. They're a respectable team. And I thought App State was flying around. Demetrius Taylor is just incredible defensive end. This running game is incredible. Cameron Peoples is one of the most fun players to watch in the country as far as I'm concerned. And then they can back him up with Nate Noel. And you get that 1-2 punch, that thunder and lightning, Ron Dane and Tiki Barber type stuff going on. And I think it gels perfectly with what they want to do with Chase Bryce, because you see a lot of play action. He's a guy who was just in a bad system that did not fit him at Duke. He wasn't going to get playing time at Clemson. I think he's you kind of look at him right now like Hunter Johnson, like Northwestern's QB. I think they can be, they can punch Miami in the mouth a little bit. They can be pesky. But at the end of the day, Miami's just got a talent advantage at every position group almost. And I think Derek King back at home, this is a game you got it. Your season starts now. We got everything still on the table. I think they're going to approach it that way. Derek King showed some fight. He led them in the third quarter. And I think a big thing for Miami, Xavier Restrepo really showed out. That beautiful touchdown pass against Bama in the third quarter. Miami's been searching for that third wide receiver. Last year they led the country. I think Mark Pope had 20% drop rate, and they had another wideout, 17% drop rate. Killed a lot of drives, killed a lot of momentum for him this year. Charleston Rambo, you already see what he's doing. Mike Harley was kind of on the side of a milk carton last game, but Restrepo stepped up. They got depth there. I still am a Cameron Harris believer. I still think that offensive line is gradually getting better. Zion Nelson's a big part of that. He's not going up against Will Anderson this week, so he's going to be better. And this defense, look, they gotta find some pressure on a quarterback, but this week I think they get it done. As far as the line, I would, if I was betting this, I would take Miami and lay in the points.
All right. Manny Diaz, one interesting stat I mentioned in Power Sweep, 3-9 against the spread when he is favored by 7 points or more, and 5 of those were upset losses. Not a good coach when they're laying big points. That being said, this is a tough spot off a loss for App State. I was impressed with App State last week, but like you mentioned, Miami has a pretty decent talent edge, especially when you look at the two quarterbacks. Who you taking, Chase Bryce or Derek King? We do have the line at 7. This is a tough game for us. Going into the season, we thought this was going to be, 10 around a 10-point line, maybe even a little more, and the line dropped. It's currently 8. You might get a couple 8.5s. So definitely a tough game to bet. Was looking to see if Stu can sway me one way or another, but yeah, we're kind of on that fence too here. So I don't think at the end of the week, if you subscribe to our late phone service, you're going to see App State on a ticket. But it is one game we are going to keep an eye on, see where that line moves as the week goes, because they do have a lot of value as an underdog. And like I mentioned, Manny Diaz struggles when his team is favored. So we'll see how that goes this weekend.
Well, and I'd point this out too, Chris. You want to watch that game because Miami next week is taking on Michigan State. And I know This is a podcast that loves Mel Tucker. He is the light, the shining way, and I appreciate that about the Power Sweep podcast. But that line before the season started was 17.5. I saw it as high as 18. I'm really interested, based on what happens in this game, what that line's going to be, because exactly what App State is going to want to do offensively, Michigan State will attempt to do the same. And I think that's something that you really definitely want to understand going into next week, because that's going to be a big noon, 12 o'clock kickoff game. And I think a lot of money is going to be coming in on Sparty.
You tried to tell me, and not that I actually disagreed with you, to be honest, but you liked Michigan State a lot against Northwestern last week. We were on Northwestern side, and Michigan State, very impressive last week. A lot of transfers on the team that made an impact, and Tucker has that team.
It's what happened with Rutgers last year, right? I mean, I know you were really close. I mean, I know it was, not the most unanimous thought there. It was a slight lean towards Northwestern. And I think really what it comes down to is, with the wholesale change in talent, I think you're going to see a team that's really, really competitive. Much more, you're not going to see a team that's blown out by 40 to Iowa. You're not going to see a team that's blown out by 40 to Ohio State this year. I think you're going to see a much more competitive team. And by the end of the season, I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan State's going bowling.
No, I wouldn't be surprised either at this point. All right, we got one more big game, and it is a game that regionally, you get some West Coast and some Midwest flavor here. Pac-12 versus Big Ten, about as big as you can get in terms of programs these days. Oregon traveling to Ohio State. Kayvon Thibodeau, Drew Mathis, both injured for Oregon. Looks like they may not be available for the Ducks, which would be huge losses. Ducks were not all that impressive last week in the win over Fresno. A game I thought that they would really handle well in Autzen with the fans there, and I thought Fresno would struggle with the crowd noise. They didn't. They were in that game until the end. And in fact, really, Oregon's offense was really underwhelming, because when you consider their first 2 touchdowns were set up on short drives after turnovers. So their offense really didn't do much with Anthony Brown under center, the former Boston College quarterback. Ohio State struggled in the first half last week, but Stroud came through in the second half, threw for 294 and 4 touchdowns. He only had 13 completions, but their weapons are so explosive in that passing game. And you add in a guy like Travion Henderson, which I mentioned on your wrap up the other day, just as Gates, man, that kid was flying. Looked like he wasn't even running fast, but he was running real fast. So Ohio State's got a lot of weapons here. Line is currently 14, I believe. Sitting 14 across the board. What are you thinking here about this game? Do you think even without Thibodeau, Oregon can hang around?
First off, I hate Oregon so much. God, that game last week. Something called a Jake Hayner just absolutely destroyed my hopes and dreams for last weekend. But besides that, I think you brought up some very pertinent points when you're looking at this game. Ohio State is going to be able to run the ball. They've shown that time in, time out. They're going to run the ball. I am concerned about CJ Stroud in that I don't know if it was first game jitters, being on the road. That's not the easiest spot for a kid, a Thursday night in Minnesota. It's not frozen yet, so everybody's in the stadium. It was a tough spot, and it showed. There was a lot of passes overthrown to the wrong shoulder. I mean, the talent's there. It's just, when is it going to come together? First start, I'm going to give it some time and not be too harsh. Defensively, though, this is a problem with Ohio State. They get the 10 platinum rhombus, 14 golden circles type players, whatever you want to call it. But they just have trouble putting it together. I think they are not going to do well against Oregon's run, but Anthony Brown has not proven he can throw. And when he comes up against decent defenses, which I certainly think Ohio State is, just talent-wise, I think they're a decent defense, top 25, top 30 when all is said and done. Fresno State, a decent defense, struggled. Iowa State last year in wasn't that the Fiesta Bowl or the yes struggled mightily against a good Iowa State defense. I expect Ohio State to cover here. I think it'll be a little. I certainly wouldn't want to play the first half here. It seems like both teams need to, at least on Ohio State's end. Ohio State in big games, it takes a minute for them to warm up the engines. You know what I mean? I think they turn it on in the second half and they just kind of explode. Olave takes over and does what he does. And that's how Garrett Wilson does what he does. I think that's how it kind of plays out. I think they cover the 14, something like, 38, 21, something like that.
I could definitely see that. We had the line at 14. Thibodeau being hurt.
That's a
knew about that going in, but that was one of those things where it was tough because we had to make that line before Sunday, and we just didn't have enough time after that injury to really to analyze it again.
Did you watch the Fresno State Oregon game? Have you watched the tape on it?
I didn't because my service does not get Pac-12 network. I followed it.
Wow, there's only 4 people. There's only 4 people in the country that get the Pac-12 network. But
I bet the over. I was frustrated because
the
funny thing is I did tell Robbie before the game started, I liked the over because I thought the offense would play well enough. I thought Haener, because I like Haener, I thought he would get them in the end zone a couple times. And I said, Thibodeau will create points off turnovers. And on the second drive, he strip sack, 3-yard touchdown drive. I'm like, see, exactly what I said was going to happen. And then he got hurt and Oregon's offense went to sleep.
He got hurt and Fresno State just started, driving. And I worry about that because when you take a big time defensive pass rusher, defensive end, a big threat off the board, and you're not replacing him, that's a big problem. Yeah, that is a big issue.
And now Stroud gets to be a lot more comfortable, which
I'd really like to know.
If you want
to know what the team total points for Ohio State is. That's an interesting play, I think, in this game. Do you?
I will look and see if I can find it. I will say that Thibodeau being out, that does allow a level of comfort for Stroud that will, if he's in the game, every play is kind of nerve-wracking because, he can get hit every play. But now he's going to be very comfortable. He's going to feel like he doesn't have to press as much because he doesn't have to look over his shoulder and find that one guy every play. I don't see it on DraftKings right now. It might not be out yet.
Yeah, I know. I usually find it on FanDuel, but I think it's something worthwhile because I think anything over 38 points might be something I end up dabbling with because I agree with you to your point. It's really tough for me to see a world in which Ohio State's by the end of it not getting Stroud time and or using Henderson or whoever, to really bust things open and wear down this defense. And plus playing in the shoe is tough. That's not a fun place to play. Unless you're Michigan State, we end up winning in Columbus quite a bit. But yeah, I like Ohio State in this one. Is this going to make it on a ticket possibly for the phone plays?
Probably not, only because we set the line at 14 and we can't really move our lines after we put out power sweep. So it won't, just because our line is so close to the line. And yeah, we won't be able to use that at the end of the week. But that's why I wanted your input. So, if our listeners want to consider putting some action on this game, that's a way to go. And I definitely might myself. All right, my good friend, tell everyone where they can find you and what's going on with the Stewcast.
Thank you, as always, my friend. Real quick, I just want to say thank you to Jim and Robbie for being professionals. No matter what you say behind their backs, they always show up and they give great insight. So appreciate to them. You can catch me at Stewcast Sports, STU Cast Sports on Twitter every Thursday morning. Me, Chris, my boy the Bobcat, and JC Sheldon from UGA Wire. We just go over a pick 'em. Got a few things on the In the Money Media YouTube network. So a little horse racing, doing a little NFL / college football show starting this week with them, which is exciting. And really, it's just an honor to be on Power Sweep because this show is must listen material. Tomorrow, when this comes out, or whenever it comes out, I will probably be working out in the gym until it's done.
Yeah, we'll be releasing it tomorrow night.
Beautiful.
So it is currently Tuesday, a little before 6:00. So that's
Can I get one request in before I head off?
Absolutely.
Can you guys please dedicate a special moment to the game of the week, which is my Hilltoppers versus my Army Golden Knights? I'll tell you what, Army Western Kentucky is about to be electric.
It's going to be a fun game, and I might have something for that game, actually. So
I appreciate that. I hope it's the same thing I have. Things, I should say, plural.
I was going to say there's a couple ways to look at that game, but I will definitely – we're going to be talking about that game in a little while. So
Beautiful.
That is not a problem at all, and give you something to listen to, Stu. So everyone – again, thank you, Stu, for coming on the podcast, and we're going to move on. Bring Jim and Robbie in now. All right, we are going to now kick it off with our two North Coast handicappers joining me again this week, Robbie DePola and the illustrious Jim Seaman.
Hello.
How's it going, guys?
Good. How's it going, Chris?
I'm good. I'm happy to have you guys back. Robbie, you are the leader in the clubhouse right now. Went 2-1. Jim 1-2 last week, and I brought up the rear. Not a good week for me. 0-3. So flush that one down the toilet per se. I will have a better week, I promise, everyone. All right. Since Robbie, you're the leader, go ahead and kick it off. I know you got a game for us involving, I believe, Liberty, correct?
Yes, that would be correct. One of the games I've kind of keyed on in this week was Liberty at Troy. Before the lines actually came out and we were spending Sunday writing Power Sweep, and I got to this game, my initial reaction was Liberty, even though they're on the road and Troy is a fairly decent Sun Belt team, I kind of pegged Liberty as like at least it'd be a touchdown favorite. And I mean, ever since this line came out, I mean, at last I looked, I believe it was down to 4.5 or 4. So it was one of the games that really caught my attention, especially as the week has gone along. Liberty is one of the most experienced teams, and I know you're going to hear that a lot. A lot of teams have experience, but in terms of ranking 1 through 130, Liberty ranks 10th in experience. They bring all 11 starters back from an offense that put up 483 yards per game last year, as well as over 38 points per game. Obviously, they're led by their leader on offense, quarterback Malik Willis. He's Auburn. He was originally at Auburn. He ended up at Liberty. Dual threat player, can run, can pass. I mean, last year he led Liberty with almost 1,000 yards rushing. He put up 944 yards on the ground, 6.7 YPC, 14 rushing touchdowns in addition to, I believe, about 20 passing touchdowns. So he's a true dual threat player, but he isn't the only super talented player on that offense. They bring back their top running back who put up nearly 800 yards last year. They have their top 3 receivers back. Their entire offensive line is back. So Malik Willis will have protection in front of him. Troy, they're a pretty solid team. They have 18 starters back themselves, including 10 on the defensive side of the ball. Their pass defense did finish number 96 last year. They do have 3 starters back in the secondary, but I kind of wonder. Troy doesn't really face too many quarterbacks the caliber of Malik Willis, so I'm interested to see how because he's shown that he can not only hurt you with his legs, but he can sure hurt you with his arm. He completed over 64% of his passes last year. Troy does have a new quarterback. They brought in a Missouri transfer, Taylor Powell. They do lose. Their biggest loss for Troy is they lose 3 of their top 4 receivers. And while Troy's been a solid team running the ball, they've passed the ball very well. Last year they threw for over 290 yards a game. The year before that, 313. Troy does like to pass the ball. Liberty has a pretty experienced secondary. So the matchup to me, I think obviously I give the edge to Liberty based on who they have on offense, but their defense is also good. They have plenty of talented players there, led by 2 defensive ends who combined for, I believe, 15 or 16 sacks last year. And to kind of wrap this up, Liberty last year went 9-2 against the spread. They won their game. Granted, it was against an FCS team this year, but they have won 9 consecutive games against the spread. And Troy last year was just 1-4 against the spread off of a straight up win. So all those points kind of come together. And my first pick for this week is going to be Liberty -4 at Troy.
Definitely got the coaching edge there with Hugh Freeze on the sidelines. Not to mention the fact that Liberty beat a couple ACC teams last year and were pretty impressive doing it. Moving on to Jim, I know you always love some action, Jim, and I think you got a good one this week with a big underdog that loves to be in this role. What do you got for us?
Well, since I went with Central and Western last week, and now I'm going to go with the other Michigan school,
The directional
Eastern
threesome.
Michigan. Eastern Michigan's getting 26 points from Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin kind of had a disappointing, well, of course, they lost to Penn State. It's kind of a close game, but, Eastern had kind of an easy time with St. Francis. Kind of when you look at the game, Wisconsin's 3-0 in the series, but they're only 1-2 ATS. Wisconsin does have a bye week after this, but then they have Notre Dame on deck. I think the big thing here is when you look at Eastern Michigan, since 2016, as an away dog, they are 19-3 ATS. That's 19-3. They've also they've played the Big Ten well. In 19, they upset Illinois 34-31. 2018, they beat Purdue 20-19. And 2017, they beat Rutgers 16-13. Now, I know none of those teams are Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a much better team, but you're also talking 26 points here. I think Wisconsin is happy with, even a 21-point win. They have been known to run up the score at times, but Eastern Michigan is just a team that likes to keep around. They've played a lot of close games. They just kind of wear you down. 19-3 ATS. I always love Eastern Michigan as a big dog, and so I'm going to go with them again this week.
Yeah, I can't blame you. I can't blame you. One of the things we look for when we put out our lines is Eastern Michigan. Are they the underdog? Because if they're the underdog, you immediately lean with Eastern Michigan. They're better as an away dog, usually because it's a higher point total you're getting. But Wisconsin, they have a bye on deck, but they get Notre Dame in 2 weeks, so they're still not going to be risking any players in the fourth quarter. They've got to focus on that big game in a couple weeks because the last thing they want to do is start 1-2, and they do have a tough slate after that as well because they get Michigan at home, at Illinois, which is not an easy game. Illinois looks a little bit rejuvenated. So I'm with you, Jim. Take the Eagles getting the points there. Jim's really good with those directional max schools. All right. Since I was last week, I'll bring up the rear. I'm going to go with FAU. I'm going to lay 7 here. Last week, they were shut down by Florida. But this is a team that is 21-5 straight up at home. So you figure they're going to win the game. They've done well at home in Boca Raton. They ran for 180 yards last week, 4.5 yards per – I'm sorry, last year, I should say, 4.5 yards per carry. They get all 5 offensive line starters back. They brought in a USF, South Florida transfer, Johnny Ford, into a deep backfield. They already had a slew of running backs like Malcolm Davidson, James Charles that had success in the past, and they added Johnny Ford to that deep backfield. Owls were only down 14-0 last week at Florida. Georgia Southern struggled with Gardner Webb, who threw for 365 yards on the Eagles defense. And that's significant to me because FAU, the one thing they did last year, they really struggled in the passing game. They had Javion Posey and Nick Tronti were their 2 quarterbacks. Those guys are now a wide receiver and their 3rd-string quarterback because they brought in 2 Power 5 transfers, one from Miami and Kosi Perry, who started last week, had a solid game against Florida, threw for 261. If you recall, he also was the one that took over after De'Aaron King got hurt, led the Canes to a nice comeback, nearly won that bowl game against Oklahoma State. He threw for 228 in that game in just over a half. I think he came in and the score was already like 21-0, and they only lost by a field goal. So, significant improvement at quarterback. Last year, this game was lopsided in the other direction. Georgia Southern won 20-3, but the experienced FAU defense and the upgrade in talent and the game being at home, I think flipped this for FAU, and I think they get a dominant win here by double digits. I know our power sweep lean was 9. I actually think it could be a little closer to 14, so I'm going to lay the 7 with FAU here.
Chris, I think another point that kind of is in your favor is you have to remember that for Georgia Southern, they not only lose their starting quarterback in Shai Wertz, who's been there for the past few years, the guy who was supposed to replace him is suspended for this game. He was suspended the first 2 games. So actually right now they have a running back who is their starting quarterback. So not an ideal situation for the Eagles.
I forgot to mention that. Tulane transfer, correct?
Yep. Amari Jones.
Yes, I forgot to mention that. Thank you, Robbie, the Sunbelt guy, for bringing that up because I had that in one of my notes and I skipped past it. All right. So FAU -7. Going back to Robbie, a team that you've been on for the last couple of years in the Mountain West. Where are you going with the next play?
Yeah, so a team that I've really liked, more so on the total, but I think Jim might have something to say about that later, is San Diego State +2 at Arizona. This game for a while was hovering around a pick 'em, and then when we looked at the lines a little before getting ready to record this, Arizona jumped up as a 2-point favorite. So as of recording, San Diego State is a 2-point underdog. The Aztecs are off a win, though it wasn't a very impressive win. They did trail New Mexico State 10-0 at the half. They ended up shutting them out in the second half. They won 28-10. The Aztecs are a team that ever since I really started to follow them about 5 years ago when I started working here, was they're a team that loves to play defense and they love to run the ball. San Diego State defense last year allowed 284 yards per game, 18 points per game. They returned 8 starters from that unit. Their defense did get off to a little bit of a shaky start. They allowed 374 yards to New Mexico State, including over 300 passing yards. So that wasn't ideal, especially going up against an Arizona team with a new quarterback in Gunnar Cruz, who threw for over 300 yards last week against BYU. However, the San Diego State pass defense last year was ranked number 15. They bring back a couple of starters from that unit, plus the players that are stepping in are pretty talented. They just need some experience. San Diego State does also have the edge overall in experience. They're on number 45 in experience. Arizona is down at number 91. Even though they do have 17 starters back, they have a first-year head coach who's implementing several new transfers into the team. So they did lose last week. Arizona did. They outgained BYU and they out first down to BYU, but they missed a couple field goals, turned through an interception. So Arizona is kind of on the rebuild. They will be getting some players back, but I think this is a miss. The line is not where I think it should be, which is in our favor, of course. San Diego State, like I said, they love to run the ball. However, their pass game isn't really developed. Their new quarterback last week only went 7 of 20 for 115 yards. The San Diego State rushing attack is led by Greg Bell, who led the Mountain, or he was up there in the Mountain West last year in rushing. He ran for over 600 yards. But they have a slew of talented backs that are behind him. They have a slew of backs that are talented. They can run. They're 3-4 deep at that position. And they put up 248 yards on the ground against New Mexico State. Arizona gave up 161 yards rushing to BYU this past week. But last year, Arizona struggled against the run. They gave up 271 yards per game, including 407 to Colorado, which might spell trouble for a team that really likes to run the ball. So I think San Diego State wins this game outright. I think they can pull the outright upset by probably anywhere from a field goal to a touchdown. And it's just a team that's experienced. They're disciplined, and I think they have the edge overall with Hoke being there as opposed to a first-year head coach for Arizona. So I'll give the edge and the outright win to San Diego State this week.
All right.
Can I just
That's
make one
Jim?
quick comment?
And
I think I agree with you, Robbie. Is you also have Arizona had a bunch of their yards kind of late in that game versus BYU. In fact, they ended up at the end. They went for a field goal with 49 seconds left because they were behind the sticks, and they did that to just try to get within 8 points of BYU. So they were kind of playing from behind. So some of those yards were kind of against a soft BYU defense at the end, a prevent defense.
Right. And one last thing I will mention is that San Diego State's defense did collect 5 sacks last week, and Arizona's offensive line gave up 4 sacks. So while they did throw for a lot of yards, if San Diego State can get some pressure on the quarterback, he might not have the same success passing the ball this week. So yeah, I'll take San Diego State +2 this week against Arizona.
Pressure usually creates turnovers too, which is always a nice thing to get, especially when you got some action on a small underdog. All right, Jim. Going to the next game. I know this is a team you love. You have a play on a win total on them, which, man, I was rooting for you last week. Who you got here?
Yeah, I'm going with New Mexico State. I know it's, New Mexico State. New Mexico State's actually getting 19 points right now. Last week they lost to San Diego State by 18. And kind of if you put San Diego State on a neutral field with New Mexico, San Diego State would be like an 11-point favorite around there. So this is kind of a big line. This is a rivalry game. In the game, New Mexico State's actually 5-6 straight up, but 6-4-1 ATS since 2009. The underdog in this game is actually 8-2 ATS with 5 outright upsets in that time. Last time they played, which was 2019, there were 13 lead changes. 5 times the game was tied. It was 31-31 at halftime. New Mexico State ended up losing 55-52. As Robbie mentioned, New Mexico State looked much better than against UTEP. They led San Diego State 10-0 in the first half, and the 28 points they gave up in the second half, one of those was an interception return for a touchdown. But in the game, like I said, this is a rivalry game. I think this is actually a chance where New Mexico State does have a shot at the upset. I'm not going to call for it right now. I would appreciate it since I, went with the win total of over 2. So, but it's New Mexico State getting 19 after only losing 18 to San Diego State last week, and they lost to 20 by UTEP. But that first week there are a couple of things that kind of went. 27. But I think New Mexico State is playing together a little bit better. I think they give New Mexico a bit of a game here.
I'll tell you what, you look at that first half yardage for New Mexico State last week, 248 to 108. So pretty impressive, not just on the scoreboard, but the way they dominated the first half. And it just kind of flipped around in the second half. And I'll tell you what, that 27-point loss to UTEP, I think at the end of the year, you're going to look back at that and say, first game of the year, and UTEP is not a bad football team. We're finding that out. They're 2-0 right now, but I think that we're going to continue to find that out. They're going to win some games in CUSA. All right, moving along. I'm going to go back to a team I lost with last week, and I promise if this does not work out, I will not use the North Carolina Tar Heels anymore. But there's a few reasons I like this game. And first, I'm going to start out by saying, they're playing Georgia State. Georgia State's coming off a 33-point loss against Army. Did not look good. They were outgained by 179 yards, only put up 48 rushing yards, threw for 129. They really struggled offensively. An interesting thing I noticed is the North Carolina defensive coordinator, Jay Bateman, is the former Army defensive coordinator who kind of built this Army defense into what it is. And I'm sure that he still has a lot of friends there, and I'm sure that he is communicating with his Army buddies right now on how to defend this Georgia State offense, which I will admit has some players on it. I have been a big fan of Destin Coates, the running back, last couple of years. Their quarterback, I don't love him as a passer, but he is a good runner, Cornelius Brown. So they've got some athletes, but North Carolina is coming in angry off that loss, and I discounted starting out in Blacksburg, your first game of the season, and how hyped up it was. I shouldn't have. And man, the Enter Sandman and everything, that crowd was electric, and North Carolina really ran into a buzzsaw. That being said, North Carolina also outgained Virginia Tech by 58 yards. Could have easily tied that game and won it in overtime if they could have finished that last drive. The Sam Howell interceptions really hurt. 2 of them weren't really on him, but he's got to stop taking sacks. He took 6 last week, but Georgia State is not going to get a pass rush like that against North Carolina. They did have 35 sacks last year, but this is a different North Carolina offensive line. I think they'll, after getting kind of embarrassed last week, they'll bounce back. Another point that I really like with North Carolina here, last year, North Carolina off three losses came back and absolutely blew out the competition the following week, winning by 40, 32, and 27. All three of those would have covered this 26-point line. Two of those wins were against ACC competition, including a win against NC State. That was the 27-point win, covered all three. So Mac Brown seems to have his guys fired up after they lose a game. And, he kind of said it after the game. They were overrated. And they need to prove it now, and I think he will stress that in practice this week. So I expect to see an angry North Carolina team. And being that Army's defense just shut down Georgia State's, and this is basically the same style of defense, the same schematic type of defense that they faced last week with better talent at North Carolina, I think North Carolina's defense is going to really create some problems for Georgia State. So I'm laying the big points here. I'm going with North Carolina one more time. Please, Mac Brown, don't fail me. Otherwise, I can't use you guys, at least for a while. So laying almost 4 touchdowns with North Carolina this week.
Bold strategy.
You know what? I think some people, if you lose a game on a team once, I think people get scared to go back to a team way too much. Now, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice. Shame on, well, that's backwards.
Fool me once, shame on you.
Yeah. So you get my point, though.
You know what you're talking
this
about.
week, yeah, I get it. But sometimes I hear people say, that team didn't cover for them one time. Well, that I can't use them the rest of the year. One bad game. Maybe you just picked them the wrong week. And I think that's what happened with North Carolina. Should have been so confident going on the road in a hostile environment. Now they're at home opener. And I don't think they'll hold back. All right. Going back to Robbie, you've got a total that I really like here in a really good rivalry game this week. One of the top games of the week in my mind. What do you got?
Yeah, it's I used this team last time we did the podcast for the first week, and it hit, albeit the score wasn't what I thought it would be. It was very lopsided, and the team I'm talking about is Iowa. The total for the Indiana-Iowa game, I believe, was about 46 and a half. The final score for the Iowa-Indiana game was 34-6. The Hawkeyes absolutely blew out Indiana. So I'm going to go back to Iowa, and they're taking on their in-state rival, Iowa State. When's the last time? You got 2 top 10 teams here. I don't know if that's ever happened in this game before.
Not
But
in a football game, only in wrestling matches.
Yeah, probably. It's a game that when you look at it, it's 2 teams that, again, I would probably say Iowa State's more talented on offense. Iowa is just Iowa's a very balanced team, and they rely on not turning the ball over, playing solid defense. Iowa State the same way. They play defense. They have an elite running back. The quarterback edge obviously favors Brock Purdy of Iowa State to Iowa's quarterback, whose name is slipping my mind at this moment, Spencer Petras. So
not every Iowa quarterback is the same. They're all clones of each other.
Exactly.
Except for Banks back in the day. He was different.
But when you look at both these teams, Iowa overall, dating back to 2019, has gone under. The under is hit in 15 of their 22 games, dating back to 2019. And over the last 2 years, Iowa State has gone under in 8 of their 13 matchups. So again, and these totals aren't always super high in these games, because Vegas knows that when an Iowa or an Iowa State play, more times than not, it may come down to a defensive battle or defensive stops. So it speaks to me that both of these teams over the last few years have played more to the under than the over. Not to mention, overall in this meeting, Iowa State and Iowa have gone under 14 of the last 16 times. And I even went back and looked, and those lines were all between like 46.5 points and 52 points. So it's not like the totals were super high and they just went under. It's these totals are typically around 47, 48, 49 points, and it's consistently going under. Right now, I believe the total is 46.5 or 46. So it is low, but I think it's warranted. And I think this is a play that is warranted because you look at the Iowa game last week and you see 34-6. But if you look at it, Iowa only did put up 303 yards and 18 first downs. 2 of their touchdowns came on pick sixes. So you take away 14 points right there, and you're at 20 points that their offense actually was responsible for. Iowa State's defense held foes to 74 yards per game under their season average last year. Iowa last week held Indiana to just 233 yards and 11 first downs. And that Indiana team is pretty talented on the offensive side of the ball. Like I mentioned, Iowa State has a veteran quarterback, a veteran running back, and they do also have the home crowd edge. Iowa State has made a huge point this year in pointing out that they have sold more season tickets this year than ever before. Fans in Ames, Iowa are very excited about this team. And though there will be some Hawkeye fans there, I still expect Iowa State to have a significant home crowd advantage. And another point I did actually read a couple of days ago that stood out to me. In their last 6 games, Iowa State has only allowed 16 points in the second half, including shutting out 3 different teams. They've not given up more than 7 points in their last 6 second halves, which to me again says they're going to keep the ball away from you, but when you have the ball, they're going to play lockdown defense and they're not going to allow you to put points on the board, which speaks to the under. So it's low, I know. Don't be afraid of it. I know people say life's too short to play an under. Forget that. This game is a game that has gone under consistently, and I think it will again here.
All right. I think that's a lot of good information on that game, and it's a game that I have a tough time with the side on, so I'm definitely looking at the total for. And, the trend is there, so it's hard to ignore. And both great defenses. Jim, moving on to a game we already talked about a little bit, but you're going to look at it from a different angle. What do you got coming up for your total?
Yeah, well, I'm going to kind of steal one. I know Robbie always likes them, but I kind of went along with them.
With good reason.
It's San Diego State and the under. Doesn't matter who they're playing. Just take San Diego State and the under. Their last 26 games, it's 7, 18, and 1 to the under. Power Plays has this game going at 43. Right now, the total is 47. Last year, if you look at their, they played 8 games. Only one of those reached 47. All their other games were under 47. Even last week, they were, down by 10. They score 28, and they're happy with that. They run out the clock. Going with Arizona. Last week it was 24-16, which is, 40 points. And that's with an Arizona field goal with 49 seconds left. It was only 14-3 at halftime. Everything to me just kind of says, hey, this is an under team. Arizona, I know they had, like I said, a bunch of passing yards, but a lot of that was late in the game. Kind of BYU was, up. They were up by 2 scores, and San Diego State kind of knows how to handle that at the end of games. They don't give up a lot of second half points. And as Robbie said not that long ago, when you think of San Diego State, If you think of defense and you think of running the ball, which both say take the under. So I'm going to go with the under 47.
Yeah, and just to kind of make that point a little stronger, I know you gave the record 18-1, but even if you want to take it back to just the last couple years, 18 of their last 22 games have gone under, which to me is, in a day and age of offense and passing the ball all over the yard, the fact that a team has gone under 18 of their last 22 games, and trust me, Vegas knows. Jim mentioned 47 points. They only hit it once last year. So again, this is a game that I really like. I know both of you guys really like as well. Always go under San Diego State.
Until that stops, just keep following that trend. I agree.
Ride the train.
Yeah, and if you've gotten our late phone service, you've noticed San Diego State has been total we've used for periodically for quite a while. Robbie has been the catalyst on a lot of those unders that we've used on San Diego State. We've picked up quite a few winners. Moving on to
Chris?
What's that?
I said, what have you got for us for their total this week?
You guys are no fun. You keep going unders. I'm going to go an over. It's going to be a little unique total, though, because you don't usually use a triple option team, a military school like Army, in an over. But if you watched Western Kentucky last week, and I'm sure Stu, who was on with us earlier, is excited for me to finally talk this Western Kentucky versus Army game. I'm going over 51.5. Number keeps dropping, which is also in my favor. I love that. But when you look at Army, typically triple option games, they are low scoring. They did just put up 43 points against Georgia State. The defense is really good. But what has the defense not seen in quite a while? A legit passing quarterback. And Bailey Zappi is that. He's a kid that came over from Houston Baptist, transferred in, and not only did he transfer in, but they also took the Houston Baptist offensive coordinator and his top 3 wide receivers all came with him. And it showed out in the first game. He threw for 424 yards and 7 touchdowns. This is a team that only threw for 164 yards a game last year. So, you already see a significant improvement in their passing game. Still something to prove in their running game, but they're throwing the ball so fast and their tempo is so fast. It's a different animal. It's going to be difficult for teams to defend, especially a team like Army, who plays a slower game, and they don't see passing teams very often. Last year, their last 5 regular season games were against Air Force, Navy, Georgia Southern, Tulane, Mercer. Prior to that, they also played the Citadel. That's their last 4 games were against triple option teams. They had 5 triple option teams on the schedule. They did not play a great quarterback other than Desmond Ridder from Cincinnati. He threw for 262 against them, and the score was only 24-10. But I remember watching that game because we had a play on, I believe it was on the under that day, and Cincinnati had trouble throwing the ball because it was really windy, it was rainy, and Desmond Ridder missed a few deep balls because Army guys kind of got lost in coverage. Guys were wide open. I think that Western Kentucky will expose that in this game and throw for some touchdowns. They will get some points on the board. But I'm also thinking, they're going to have some trouble defending the option. Now, a couple of years ago, they held Army to 8 points. They did a great job defending the option. It was Tyson Helton's first year. They only gave up 208 yards, including 137 on the ground. But that was against a different defensive coordinator for Western Kentucky at the time. And their run D was stout that year. They only gave up 136 and 3.7. Last year, they went up to 171 and 4.2. This year, they've already given up 201 rushing yards and 5.9 yards per carry to UT Martin last week. So some concerns in the Western Kentucky rush D. They did have one of their big defensive tackles transfer out before the season started. So that was a big loss for them. Ricky Barber, I believe he went to Purdue. Their best defensive lineman, D'Angelo Malone, is a monster. He's an absolute monster, former CUSA Defensive Player of the Year. But he gets it done with his pass rush. He's always been a pass rush first guy, not a great run stopper, adequate, but he's going to end up playing on Sundays because of his pass rush ability. He's not going to be able to show that off here because Army's just going to run the ball right at you, and they're going to take advantage of his over aggressiveness. So 51.5 here seems a little light. I think about this game, and I see the same kind of game that Army had a couple years ago when they played Hawaii, and the final score, that was 2018, I believe, 19, I'm sorry, 19, and Army lost that game 52-31. Now, I don't think they're going to lose that game by a lopsided score like that, but there was over 1,000 yards in that game. Army really just gouged Hawaii with big rushes. They ran for 411, but they gave up 359 passing. So both teams went back and forth, both with their strength. I think this is going to be a similar game. Western Kentucky's going to throw for a lot of yards. Army's going to run for a lot of yards. We might get a game that I think this could end up being in the 70s. I just don't think that Vegas has caught up to Western Kentucky's offense, not realizing that all these transfers are in and the impact that it's had. So Western Kentucky, Army over 51.5.
I think the other thing that you mentioned too is Army did have a passing game last week, 3 of 4, 98 yards, 2 touchdowns. So they do have that quick play there.
Yeah, when the run game's gone, that passing attack is really big for them because they hit those big play action passes. All right, Jim and Robbie, say so long for this.
Talk to you next week.
Talk to you next week. Best of luck to you guys.
All right, we're going to close this up in a moment. All right, well, I hope everyone had fun with this week's podcast, and I hope I do better because that was not a great week for me. So I promise that the work is in there. I just need to have better results. I know Jim and Robbie are out to have an even better week. And as always, we are striving to do our best at NorthCoast and give winners. Not the greatest week last week, not a total disaster, though. We can improve from that. We got the NFL coming up this week. So jump on board. As usual, we are going to give out a $10 discount, and you can go on ncsports.com and use this code on Saturday, and you will get $10 off our late phone plays for just Saturday or just Sunday. Or you can call in and get $10 off the entire weekend by calling 1-800-654-3448. So that's either $10 off Saturday or Sunday if you do it online, or $10 off the late phones if you call in for the entire weekend. You get call 1-800-654-3448. The code we're going to give out this week is Oregon. That's the big game this week. So Oregon is the code. Make sure you go to ncsports.com or you call in 1-800-654-3448. Had a lot of fun with everyone this week. For Jim, Robbie, and myself, we'll talk to everyone next week, and let's go cash some tickets.